this week, by the way. You can go get our full Kerry Mayo preview with Michael Quinlivan from the other morning on OTB AM, and of course Kieran Donaghy's Shot Clock on youtube.com/off the ball. But as I say, we're going to kick things off with the three other games, really. That's going to be our focus, but kick things off with Roscommon against Tyrone. And Enda McGinley is on the line. How are you, Enda?
I'm good.
So when it comes to this group in the Super 8s, the common theory is that Dublin are going to go through and Tyrone are going to follow them. I dare say that Roscommon aren't too happy looking at that, and they will have something to say about that tomorrow evening.
I'm expecting a massive game from Roscommon tomorrow. Obviously, it is a mirror image. Them three teams shared their group last year in the Super 8s, and Roscommon had an absolute nightmare, which of course started with a hammering by Tyrone in Croke Park. Tyrone, I think, put something like 420 or something on them in Croke Park, and that completely wrecked Roscommon from there on. It's been very clear the mood coming out of the Roscommon camp. Kevin McStay obviously stepped down. Anthony Cunningham has come in. They were making no bones about how much that taught them last year in terms of their need to improve their physicality and their conditioning, and they seem to have worked very, very hard in that. They got relegated from Division 1, which obviously wouldn't have been part of the plan, but the two away wins to Mayo and Galway are hugely impressive results for them. Their effort level and their intensity in that Connacht final was something else, especially whenever they seem to have got derailed. So they have done a huge amount of work to get back to now, and they will be massively determined. That Anthony Cunningham's record as a manager is something else across the various codes, and you can just imagine a game like this where they are essentially being written off. It's all about Tyrone and Dublin apparently this side of the draw, but I think this match in Hyde Park is going to be massive, and I think Roscommon will see it as their chance, their moment to send out a big statement.
Is it that physicality that you mentioned, the toughening up of this Roscommon team, that has been the biggest hallmark of 2019 versus 2018? Or have you noticed a tactical shift or anything new that Anthony Cunningham is doing that might give them a better chance in this rematch against Tyrone?
Yeah, I think they've got the balance slightly right. I think last year, Kevin McStay, obviously they were involved in that absolute classic game against Armagh, but it was the most open game of football I've seen in many years, and whilst it was entertaining, I was left worried coming away from it that if Roscommon are going to play like that against the more modern setup teams, if we can describe them as that, I thought they would be badly exposed, and that's what happened in Croke Park against Tyrone. So I don't think it's harsh to call them naive last year, but that's how it looked to me. They're not like that this year. I think they have, their defence has changed quite a bit. They've at least 4 new defenders in there compared to the team that played Tyrone last year. Some of them are very physical, but they seem tighter at the back than last year. They got their matchups perfect against Galway, and they seem to be holding that defensive shape much better. They certainly have focused on that a lot more than they appeared to last year, but that's not a huge step up from last year's defensive effort, if I'm being honest. But I think that's the biggest part that has come up, along with the intensity and the physicality and the belief that they seem to be bringing to the big games.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially when you look at that shift in the context of Tyrone as well, because that's something that they've struggled with as well over the last couple of years, really, the idea between that balance. They've been too defensive at times potentially, or this year they've been a little bit naive themselves, perhaps in that Donegal game. So they're going through a similar struggle of identity.
Yeah, Tyrone, well, I think they've went back to the identity they know best. They certainly, during the National League, seemed to want to push up. During last year's All-Ireland final, actually, they wanted to push up more and very much engage Dublin. It fell short that day, but I think that was a real change in the guard. They followed that through in the National League and took it on through into the Championship. And then the really poor performance against Donegal led to a complete change of tact, and the players went back to something that they felt very, very comfortable with. Of course, the addition this year is with Cathal McShane at full forward, and there's a lot of debate and a lot of discussion about, right, well, we've seen the defensive tactics simply fail and come up short time and time again. Is Cathal McShane enough of a change to make that a winning formula in the biggest of games? Now, you might say Roscommon aren't going to bring the same challenge level that the likes of Dublin are going to test that system. But I think Roscommon will have enough about them to target Cathal McShane, to target that element of him and to really test the running game of Tyrone that only started to get back up and going well against Kildare. The performance in Kildare was very good, but again, you have to query the level of where Kildare were at, and you can do the exact same with Cavan, and then you're wondering just where Tyrone are truly at in terms of playing a top motivated team, because their last 2 games, I wouldn't put their opposition in that bracket.
Right, that's interesting, because the hype this week has really all been for Tyrone. Kieran Donaghy saying the other day that they're the second best team in the country, and I was really thinking that this Donegal result was the best thing that ever happened to this Tyrone team, because they found that balance now and that they're ready and they're primed to perhaps be the best team to take on Dublin. But maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, Enda.
Oh, absolutely, and there's nobody else that people seem, well, apart from Mayo, there's nobody else that people seem to be as keen to get built up against. And I think it's just everybody's looking for that team that's going to take on Dublin, and Tyrone have been in that sort of category this past couple of years, and people are looking for evidence and are very happy to see evidence of a team sort of really hitting top form. Listen, some of the football they played against Kildare and Cavan for that matter was absolutely brilliant to watch, really solid at the back. They were starting to move through the gears well up front. Cathal McShane, his form has been a revelation. I'd have to tip my hat to my old buddy Stephen O'Neill. He seems to have worked an absolute mastermind with Cathal McShane. His decision making at times and his composure on the ball in previous years were not his strong points, yet of the past 2 games I can't think of a wrong decision he made, and considering the possession he's getting and the high pressure situations he's getting them in, that's remarkable. So Tyrone they are definitely going well, but how high a calibre that is, we have no idea. I think Cavan and Kildare were both poor on the day, and they were both teams that looked as if they were happy enough for their season to be over. I think that's not going to be the case in Hyde Park today, and it's certainly not going to be the case in some of the bigger games to come if Tyrone do progress. So I think today will be a further step up to see where Tyrone are at. And listen, if Tyrone come through today very strongly, that hype is going to grow again. But I don't think we've seen enough real evidence to really pin their hopes. As Mickey himself always says, the difference between being absolutely terrible when you lose and absolutely brilliant when you win, they're always somewhere in between, and I think Tyrone are somewhere in between at the minute.
And we all know how instrumental Peter Hart is for Tyrone and how they play. Obviously he's had that one of his black cards, or his black card ban has been overturned. He's going to be available. So you might tell us, obviously, having him back regards to how they play, how important it is, but also does him coming back after the team believing him to be out for this game, how much of a boost does that bring to the panel as well coming into this match?
Yeah, I think bottom line, I don't think the team ever for 1 second would have assumed or would have thought that he was missing the game. I think even from the Longford game, there was just an absolute assumption, well, that black card will never ever stand. Never mind the other one at that stage against Donegal, and then the one that came against Cavan. But everybody assumed that the Cavan one or the Longford one was always going to be ruled out. So they just couldn't appeal it at that time. So there would have been 100% confidence that Petey Hart was available. In terms of his importance, absolutely massive. Teams, especially the likes of Dublin with John Small, have had a habit of being able to curtail him. When he's curtailed, Tyrone are definitely hampered. That was even more so this year whenever so many of Tyrone's other key players, the likes of Matty Donnelly, the likes of Niall Sludden, the likes of Tiernan McCann, whenever they weren't particularly on form, Petey's form held relatively well through that phase and joined with Cathal McShane to give them some sort of quality when they were struggling this year. Some of them other players, the likes of Matty Donnelly, the likes of Niall Sludden, have really seemed to turn a corner over the last game or two, and that's the great benefit of the qualifiers. But Petey Hart's form is still absolutely massive. He's in a rich vein of form at the minute. His test is to be able to continue having a huge influence whenever teams really put the clampers on him, and I think they'll do that. The other sort of key thing for Roscommon to deal with is Colm Kavanagh. Tyrone showed against Donegal that their defence, if open, can really be got out, and Roscommon have some very good forwards. Since Tyrone have went back to the full-on sort of defensive zonal formation, and particularly Colm Kavanagh's role within that. Colm Kavanagh came on as a sub and went off as a sub in some of the earlier games. He was just uncomfortable and not performing well, having missed out so much of the National League with injury. He was struggling to get form. Tyrone have went back to their old shape. He's went back to his old position, which he's more than happy in and brilliant in, and has had a massive influence against both Kildare and Cavan. So Roscommon, as much as negating the likes of Matty Donnelly, Sludden and Hart, which most teams know about, they have to do something about Colm Cavanagh's ability to solidify that Tyrone defence. And if they do that, I think from both a defensive and attacking point of view, they can ask massive questions of Tyrone.
Are they going to win on tomorrow evening end? Is it going to be a win for Tyrone on the road?
I have to say this one's a big one. There is enough in this game between Cunningham, between Roscommon's mindset coming into it, between the quality Roscommon have, and about the unknown level that Tyrone are definitely at. That makes me particularly nervous, and I haven't been nervous over the past few games. So I'm hoping for a Tyrone win, but this is a big match.
But the layoff must play into this as well, though. Roscommon,
Yeah.
It's because Tyrone obviously they've been motoring now over the last couple of weeks, and that's a huge bonus for them coming into this match.
Absolutely, and there's two things about that. One is what caused what produced Tyrone's run of games was the defeat, and there is nothing like a defeat to make a team really look at itself very, very hard, take lots of criticism, which sort of gels boys together and hardens boys up for realising what it's really about, which is that work rate and just within that circle on the team. So that's a hugely important feature. The run of games has allowed several Tyrone players that have been out of colour or off colour so far this year to rediscover their form. Roscommon, on the other hand, have had two brilliant victories in the Connacht Championship that will really boost confidence. They will have their backs will be red raw, having been slapped and congratulated about, and that tends to make a team soft. The only thing is Roscommon have the massive memory of last year's Super 8s, and usually a team can be vulnerable coming off great wins and being the flavour of the month in their own county. But I think for Anthony Cunningham, this is a home run in terms of motivating and keeping that team focused over the past few weeks because of what happened in last year's Super 8. That had a massive I thought it would have made an even bigger psychological scar on Roscommon because I thought they would have been impacted negatively this year. They've come back, they've won that Connacht Championship impressively, and I think if that Super 8 thing last year has been motivating all the time, then this is the game tomorrow that they're going to show what they're about, and they'll be targeting it massively, and that's why I would just be a wee bit worried. I don't think Roscommon will be overly complacent or will be soft coming off the back of their two wins, and the break I think will just made them, whoever they were going to play, they were always going to see this game as a huge launch pad. The fact that it's Tyrone and the mirroring of last year's Super 8 will just have essentially set all the fuses ready to light.
On Sunday afternoon, we've got Donegal against Meath. You mentioned that Tyrone, their backs may be red raw from the back slapping that's been going on. Like, Donegal have been getting tons of praise as well. Is that something that's going to affect them, or is it something that they deserve, that praise?
I think they deserve it. I've seen them several times this year, and they are a really, really impressive outfit. You look for the various components of a top team that you want to see, and Donegal appear to tick all the boxes, with one question mark as far as I'm concerned. They've come through Ulster, but again, very, very like Roscommon. They fell short last year in the Super 8, got caught by Tyrone up in Ballybuffet, having won the Ulster Championship, and suddenly the Ulster Championship meant absolutely nothing. That Donegal squad have won enough to know at this stage that, yeah, the Ulster Championship was fine, but listen, lads, we're about bigger things. They'll not have celebrated that a huge amount. They are targeting bigger things, and the fact that last year it all fell apart after the Super 8 and nobody was thinking of any Ulster Championship win after Tyrone beat them in Ballybuffet, then again they'll have it. They'll have a fairly easy job. Rochford and Declan Bonner will have a fairly easy job of getting this team's feet back down in the ground.
What is the weakness, if there is one, of this Donegal team?
Yeah, so the comparisons between Donegal and Dublin are there. I've made them myself at times in terms of Donegal's sheer attacking threat, their variation that they can bring to their forward play, their composure that they show, their decision making, the high quality, the very few mistakes that they make when they're attacking is very, very high and equitable in many ways to what Dublin can produce, and that is about as high a compliment as you can pay a Gaelic football team at the minute. The issue is Dublin conceded 0-4 in the Leinster final. Donegal conceded heavily against Cavan, and even Tyrone off colour scored maybe 112, 114 against them. So Donegal, and whether it's people are always trying to figure out Rochford's influence in all of this, and certainly there's huge positives with that, but Donegal are leaky at the back that we haven't seen from Donegal before in a long time, and they have to get that balance right. Dublin have shown for a long time their ability to absolutely kill teams on the front foot and offensively, but this year they seem to be even more ruthless in terms of defensively, so they have upped the game in that regard. Donegal, for me, to be in that conversation, need to show a much greater improvement in their defensive solidity, which is of course ironic, being that their whole modern era has been built on defensive, their defensive structure. So I'm sure a bit of attention has turned to that, and they'll get their games now in the Super 8s to try and up that side of their game.
Meath won't fear this Donegal team. Like, they weren't a million miles away from them in the league. And I do remember, though, Michael Murphy putting on, I think I was reading one of the papers, a masterful display in that Division 2 final. So how do Meath nullify the threat of Michael Murphy this weekend?
Yeah, Michael Murphy is the conundrum for any team facing him. No team has managed to keep him fully quiet. Like, he is a player that seems to be in his absolute prime at the minute. And I think the fact that Donegal have such a heavy attacking talent without him means that the old debate between full forward and midfield is pretty much made redundant this year. He does slip into full forward the odd time, particularly if say in the instance of Meath or another team getting a sort of a full blanket defence in position, and Dublin and Donegal having to go through the phases, he sometimes finds himself in full forward, and then they just create a space and launch it in high, so he will find himself in that attacking position at times. But in terms of trying to negate him, it's exceptionally difficult. You need a player of exceptional strength and athleticism to essentially forget about their own game and just absolutely hound him for 70 minutes. It has to be as negative as that. And whether you want to go down that route and take away from your own game, or whether you try to, like, Michael Murphy is the ultimate link man, a wee bit like Kilkenny for Dublin. And it's very hard to cut out them just wee fist passes, wee setups, the way he controls the play. And sometimes you just have to accept he is going to have an influence. We have to shut down everybody else. Donegal have a lot of other attacks. A wee bit like Meath, they've got a couple of brilliant attacking defenders, and then they've a couple of real sharp forwards as well. So the two teams are very similar in many ways. But I think Donegal, this development pathway that people talk about, I think Donegal are further along that and are shooting at a slightly higher level than where Meath are at.
Meath forwards James Conlon, he's had a pretty good year, but Dublin seem to nullify his threat. Like, he's a very small player, but I suppose he's one of those old-fashioned kind of forwards where very nimble. He can get around defenders. But can he have an impact on the game this weekend, do you think?
I think he can. I think the Dublin performance, whilst it's a massive job for Andy McEntee to try and limit the psychological impact of that Dublin performance, the result against Clare will certainly have well, I suppose showed that he had managed that to an extent. But again, we'll see it against Donegal. For the likes of Connolly that struggled against Dublin, Meath had quite a bit of ball against Dublin, and they shot an awful lot of wides. Now, the question mark is two there. Was that just one of them days? And any team and any forward, individually and collectively, can have that sort of day where they miss plenty of shots. The thing I would sometimes put to that is it's either just one of them days, or it's a sign that top level quality actually isn't there, and when you're put under big pressure on a big stage, actually your shooting goes a bit astray, and it's up to them forwards to prove that they are up to it on the big day. I wouldn't write them off against further Dublin performance, because they've scored heavily in other games, scored heavily against Laois, and scored heavily against Clare obviously as well. So they have got forward talent there, but this is another level. Meath haven't been at the quarter-final stage for a long time. They've never obviously been in the Super 8s because it's a relatively new structure. But this is going to be a massive atmosphere, and you're absolutely right. They have been very close to Donegal in the past. 2 points in the league final, having led for quite a bit through it. Close up in Ballybuffet during the league. Close even they've played them over the last couple of years as well. 2017, I think there was maybe only 1 point in it when they played. So these teams know each other well, and Donegal, Meath have always been able to get very, very close to Donegal. But Donegal that I've seen the last few games are a very different animal than the team that sort of laboured its way through Division 2. We're missing a lot of players through Division 2, and we're only getting them back towards the latter stages. They're a different beast now, and I expect a really high quality attacking performance from Donegal. Meath have shown to be strong defensively. Like they did give Dublin lots of problems defensively for 40-50 minutes of that game. So I think they can pose Donegal more questions there. But it's the quality of their forward line and whether they can really step up on the big day. The likes of Newman, obviously, can they really count on the big day? But Donegal have their questions in defence too, and so the game is fairly even.
You are calling a Donegal win, though, I presume.
Yeah, I'd call a Donegal win. I think maybe the handicap's +7. It mightn't be as comfortable as that. Yeah, I think so. I think Meath will be hoping for a bigger game than that. The only problem is if Donegal really kick into a high gear, then you do fear for Meath. But I'm hopeful that Meath can produce a really big performance. I think it'll be really important for them and set them up for a decent Super 8 campaign. They're sort of the outlier in that group. Obviously, it's a strong group. Meath, Kerry, Donegal are the three up. Meath are seen as below that level. So you would have to hope that Meath can give a really credible performance, and then that could be a cracking group.
Let's talk about Croke Park briefly just to finish. Tomorrow night, Dublin against Cork, and really this Dublin run is going to be interesting now because there's a real path that every game they play is going to get tougher. The opposition is going to be Cork, then Roscommon, then Tyrone, then somebody from the Super 8 group on the other side, so every game gets harder. From this first step tomorrow night, what are you looking at as a potential weakness for Jim Gavin's side?
Cork are going to bring a directness to their attacking play and have serious quality up there, but is that Cork quality definitely more reliable than the Meath quality that Dublin completely shut down? I would say they're almost on a similar level, Meath and Cork, in terms of the really nice high quality players that they've got, but players that are going to struggle whenever they're coming up against the might of Dublin. So it would be brilliant to see Cork. We haven't seen Cork v Dublin. Cork have come up out of relative obscurity and much criticism earlier on in the year, obviously, and they've bounced back with some really good performances. But I would fear that Dublin are going to be a significant reality check in that particular conversation. How much we learn about Dublin, I don't think we'll learn absolutely anything against Dublin. If they struggle against Cork, that'll give us all a wee bit of hope. That will be ill-placed. Because I don't think they'll have proved anything. Do I think they're going to struggle against Cork? I don't think so. I'd love if Cork can give a really good performance, but Cork haven't played anything like this. They've no experience of Dublin before. We've seen car crashes over the last several years where teams build themselves up that haven't played Dublin before, and it's a pretty tough experience when you come out against them and you realise what they're really about, because they rarely give teams an easy start. So I would fear for Cork.
And just Jim Gavin hasn't made too many changes to his team, the championship. I think it was just one change in each of the Leinster championship matches. But his hand is forced in this game now because obviously Johnny Cooper, we're led to believe, is going to be still out with that foot injury that's kept him out since March. And of course, James McCarthy, who I'd argue possibly the greatest footballer in the championship over the last couple of years, he's going to be out now with a knee injury. Possibly will miss the second game as well. So with regards to team selection, what does Jim Gavin do here? Like, he's a couple of options in midfield to play alongside Michael or Brian Fenton. There's Michael Darragh Macaulay, Darren Gavin, who we haven't seen since the first game. He had a good game against Kerry, I remember, in the league. Definitely a player for the future, maybe not for this weekend. And then there's a possibility he might even drop Kieran Kilkenny into midfield, and that would then allow Dean Rock to start up front, because I just can't see how you drop any of the six Dublin forwards, because they've all been in brilliant form. And even though Dean Rock is the man for the frees and that kind of thing, Cormac Costello's been brilliant there. So how do you see that team selection playing out against Cork this weekend?
Yeah, that's a conundrum for Jim Gavin and Dublin, this whole the Dean Rock and the fact that there's none of the players. Like Jim Gavin has famously always said, well, look, whenever you're in and you're playing well, then it's up to you to hold the jersey, and none of them Dublin forwards are given an opportunity to take that jersey off them. And you've Dean Rock sitting and he does nothing wrong whenever he comes in either, so they have serious quality there. query about moving the likes of Kieran Kilkenny to midfield. Dublin's queried weakness that they seem to be addressing in rather emphatic style is the defensive side of things. And to move Kilkenny, a key sort of forward player, back into midfield would hardly suggest a team that's concentrating on the defensive style. You're putting on even more forwards, and it's not as if they've difficulty in terms of their scoring threat. So I would think Michael Macaulay would come in there, and the forward line would keep playing as is. With 3 games on the bounce now, and then into your semi-final, you've seen with Johnny Cooper, you've seen with James McCarthy, injuries can happen. So if all 7 forwards of them sort of forwards remain fully fit, well then that's a headache Jim Gavin will have to cope with, but he always likes to be able to have impact subs coming off the bench, so he'll quite happily have that problem. But I think any manager wants to keep a wee bit in reserve if you've the luxury of doing so. And I think with the injuries that has happened to them other players, he'll be more than aware that, look, injuries can happen at forward line, but he's replacing with the likes of that quality. Well, then that'll not, the team won't miss a blink.
Just briefly, if you had to drop one of those Dublin forwards for Dean Rock this weekend, who would it be?
I wouldn't, to be honest. I wouldn't drop any of them. Possibly. You could look at maybe the likes of Scully is less headline grabbing than some of them, but he does so much work, and there is a lot of craft in his play, and he creates an awful lot of space. The nature of his runs, he unlocks an awful lot of the more stubborn defences. So I wouldn't replace him. So to be honest, I would just have to console Dean Rock with the multiple All-Irelands that are weighing heavily in his pocket, to just bide his time a wee bit and continue coming on. Look, if Dublin are in a sweat, big games should still come down to the final 20 minutes, and that's when the big players count. And if he's turning to you at that stage to throw you on, there's tougher places to be in Gaelic football, I'd imagine.
Well, that's what Dean Rock gets for going for that goal instead of taking his point against me there in the Leinster final. One last one in the game of the weekend. We've previewed it all week. Mayo against Kerry in Killarney on Saturday afternoon. Your former teammate Sean Kavanagh politely described the Kerry fans as dogs when describing the Killarney atmosphere when Tyrone were down there in 2012. How are Mayo going to handle those dogs screaming abuse at them on Sunday afternoon?
Given their own supporters, I'm not sure they'll be overly worried about the noise coming from the Kerry ones. It's just set up like this whole weekend. The football championship has been brilliant to date. The Super 8s, there's just so much intrigue and well-matched fixtures in these games coming up, the ones we've discussed already, but obviously Kerry, Mayo down there, it feels like an absolute clincher of a tie for both teams. Again, do we know where both? There's so many question marks still about both teams, despite how much we've seen them. There's still big question marks there. You have a feeling that there's going to be something special coming from Mayo. We all 2 weeks ago had them written off with the injuries that they had, with the energy sapping run of games. You were thinking, no, this is a team just waiting to be put out of its misery. Suddenly they've re-gelled and bounced back again, and suddenly you're not particularly doubting the energy that they're going to bring down in Killarney. Kerry, on the other hand, were unimpressive against Clare, I suppose, in some ways. They were unimpressive against Cork in some ways, and obviously that some way primarily is defensively, because at times their forward play is so good to look at. Like, I mean, that Clare game, I was watching it, and yes, they were being criticised for not being further ahead, but some of the quality of their interplay in their forward line was out of the best possible drawer of Gaelic football. So they can bring something special up there, but it is defensively that they have their issues. And that's going to be severely tested with Mayo, because Mayo have a couple of new young guns in there. Andy Moran's not suddenly the player he was from them anymore. They've got men coming back. Killian O'Connor's obviously come back in now, recovering from injury, and he's had a game under his belt to get further up to speed. It's really set up for a massive tie, and exceptionally difficult to call, because Kerry haven't exactly showed a massive amount in terms of their defensive ability to suggest that they can definitely live with the top teams.
So I'm sensing a Mayo prediction here.
I'm actually going to go Kerry. Whilst I said I think Mayo have rebounded well from the injuries, I still think them injuries there. They've still lost Dermot O'Connell. Lee Keegan can't be fully fit. They have players nursing injuries, so whilst they are dogs of war and they know how to get over the line, and everybody's supposed talking about their more cynical aspect of their play, there'll be plenty of dark arts down in Killarney, and Tyrone nowhere near it, which is always a nice one to see. I'm thinking Kerry will come up with something pretty strong defensively. I think they'll know they've questions to answer. I think they'll have been working on them, and they'll know that this is a must-win game, and I think they have the firepower to hurt Mayo as well.
Enda McGinley, good stuff. Enjoy the weekend's football.
All the best.
Enda McGinley there on the line, looking ahead to a packed Super 8 schedule. If you missed any of our GA coverage during the week, you can hop on to youtube.com/offtheball. We are turning our attention to football next and some of the Irish performances in Europe. Steve, you were at Richmond Park last night. You're speaking to Harry Kenny in the aftermath of Pats' 2-0 defeat.